The economy collapsed, banks vanished overnight, and 9 million American families still ate, not because the government fed them, but because they knew 9 things about soil that a $200 billion industry spent the next 80 years trying to make you forget. These are those 9 things. Everyone backed by government records and peer-reviewed science. None of them cost $1. And by the end of this video, your garden will never be the same. October 1929. The stock market collapsed in 48 hours. Within 3 years, 1 in 4 American workers had no job. Banks closed, farms failed. Families who had never known hardship stood in bread lines. But something happened in the backyards of America that nobody talks about today. Detroit converted vacant lots into 700 community gardens, feeding over 200,000 people. New York City organized 5,000 rooftop and lot gardens through its welfare department. Cleveland, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, the same pattern everywhere. When the entire economic system broke down, people turned to soil. These were not hobby gardens. These were survival systems built on techniques that had been passed down for generations. Methods that worked not because they were simple, but because they were deeply understood. And then, after the war, they were erased. Here is who erased them and why. When World War II ended, the United States had a problem. The government had built 10 massive ammonia production plants to manufacture ammonium nitrate for bombs. In 1945, there were no more bombs to build. The factories needed a new customer. The solution was simple and devastating. Spread the surplus bomb-making chemical on farmland. Call it fertilizer. The Tennessee Valley Authority gave free synthetic fertilizer to 90,000 farms as a demonstration program. A $41 million government investment grew into a $57 billion industry. United States fertilizer consumption went from 2 million tons in the late 1940s to 24 million tons by 1981. The same USDA that had printed detailed guides on compost, cover crops, and natural soil biology throughout the 1930s quietly stopped publishing them. University agricultural departments received new funding from fertilizer companies. The Depression-era knowledge did not disappear because it stopped working. It disappeared because it stopped being profitable. The global fertilizer market is now worth $200 billion a year. 4 corporations control 75% of United States production. Not one of these 9 tricks requires their product. That is not a coincidence. In the 1930s, families across Yorkshire, Denmark, and the American Midwest did something that looks strange until you understand the physics behind it. They dug down instead of building up. A trench bed is a narrow trench about 2 feet deep and 1 spade width wide, dug directly into your plot. At the bottom, twigs, branches, straw. Above that, kitchen scraps and composted material. Then soil, mounded just above ground level. What happens beneath the surface changes everything. The organic material at the bottom decomposes and generates heat, the same biological warmth you feel when you reach into an active compost pile. That heat rises continuously into the root zone. In a Yorkshire allotment study from the 1940s, trenchbed gardeners were still harvesting cabbage, kale, and carrots 3 full weeks after surrounding flatbeds had frozen solid. And heat is only one benefit. As the buried organic layer breaks down, it releases nutrients directly where roots grow, not washing away in rain, not evaporating in sun. The walls of the trench trap moisture that flat soil loses to wind. In drought years, and the 1930s had many, trench beds stayed productive when every flat garden around them failed. Modern raised beds are fashionable. They are also expensive. A trench bed costs nothing except time. Your great-grandmother did not need a lumber yard, a Pinterest board, or a hardware store. She needed a shovel and the knowledge that depth changes everything. Here is a truth your grandmother knew that modern gardening has completely forgotten. Bare soil is not neutral. Bare soil is dying. Every hour soil sits exposed to sun and wind, it loses moisture. Topsoil, the thin living layer that took thousands of years to form, erodes and blows away. The microorganisms that feed your plants overheat and die. A 1954 Kansas agricultural study found that half an inch of mulch reduced soil evaporation by 41%. 3 inches reduced it by 67%. An 11-year Ohio State study found organic mulch increased water-holding capacity by up to 35%. Depression-era gardeners had no money for irrigation systems. They had straw, leaves, grass clippings, and newspaper, layered 3 to 4 inches thick around every plant in the garden. But here is the number that should permanently change how you think. In a classic Nigerian field trial, unmulched soil exposed to the same rain and sun lost 41 tons of topsoil per acre in a single year. Mulched soil? 0. Not less. 0. Same plot, same weather. The only difference was a layer of organic material on the surface. The Depression-era family who mulched their garden was following the logic of every forest on Earth. Nothing in nature leaves soil bare. It is always covered, always protected, always in the process of being fed. When you mulch, you are not adding something to your garden. You are stopping the bleeding. Every Depression-era family that heated with wood had something that modern gardeners pay good money for at garden centers: potassium. Not in a bag with a label, in the ash bucket beside the stove. Wood ash is one of the most complete soil amendments you can apply. Standard hardwood ash contains 3 to 7% potassium, 10 to 25% calcium, and meaningful amounts of magnesium, phosphorus, and trace minerals. Potassium is what plants use to build strong roots, regulate water, and develop disease resistance. Without it, tomatoes crack, beans go limp. Squash never sets fruit properly. In the 1930s, there was no debate about what to do with wood ash. It went on the garden, every handful, every season. The USDA Extension Bulletin of 1938 specifically listed wood ash as a complete potash substitute for kitchen garden soil. Families who used it consistently reported stronger yields, fewer disease problems, and vegetables that stored longer through winter. The rules are simple. Use only ash from untreated, unpainted hardwood. Never coal or treated lumber. Those harm soil biology. Apply no more than 20 pounds per 100 square feet per year. Too much raises soil pH too high. Mix it into the top few inches in early spring, or sprinkle around plants during the season and water it in. Your Fireplace already paid the fertilizer bill. You just have to stop throwing it away. The commercial pesticide industry generates $14 billion a year in fungicide sales alone. Every dollar of that revenue depends on you not knowing what every Depression-era gardener understood without a single laboratory. Plants talk to each other, and when you listen to what they are saying, you do not need a spray bottle. Marigolds were planted beside nearly every vegetable in the relief garden manuals of the 1930s, not for decoration, but for warfare. Their roots release compounds called alpha-terphenol that suppress root knot nematodes, microscopic worms that destroy root systems underground. Their flowers attract hoverflies and parasitic wasps that eat aphids and caterpillars. One flower doing the work of 3 different pesticides. Cost: 1 seed. In 2024, researchers studying traditional farming in Oaxaca, Mexico, confirmed something even more remarkable. When corn is attacked by caterpillars, it releases chemical signals into the air. Neighboring bean plants detect those signals and respond by producing enriched nectar. Wasps feeding on that enriched nectar live nearly twice as long and kill dramatically more caterpillars attacking the corn. The plants are running a coordinated defense. They recruited reinforcements. Monoculture farming, 1 crop, 1 row, empty space between, dismantles this system entirely. The Depression-era mixed garden, flowers, herbs, and vegetables growing together, activated it. Plant marigolds at the edge of every bed. Plant basil beside tomatoes. Let dill and fennel flower. Their flat blooms are landing pads for every beneficial insect in the neighborhood. Your garden does not need chemicals. It needs the right neighbors. 1 teaspoon of healthy forest soil contains up to 1 billion bacteria, several yards of fungal threads, and up to 50,000 different microbial species. Professor Kristen DeAngelis at the University of Massachusetts found there are more organisms in that single teaspoon than there are stars in the observable universe. Your garden soil should contain this. If it does not, you are not growing in soil, you are growing in particles. Depression-era gardeners did not know the word mycorrhizae. They did not have microscopes, but they knew this. If your garden is struggling, take a bucket full of dirt from the woods and mix it in. Folk knowledge, passed from grandmother to granddaughter. And in 2016, researchers at the Netherlands Institute of Ecology proved exactly why it worked. They published in the journal Nature Plants. They spread a layer of soil, less than 1 centimeter thick, from healthy land onto farmland that had been chemically farmed for nearly 60 years. Within 6 years, the transplanted microbes did not just improve the soil. They steered the entire ecosystem. Plant communities shifted, invertebrates returned, fungal networks rebuilt from scratch. The lead researcher concluded, soil organisms, the bacteria, fungi, and roundworms, determine the direction of ecosystem restoration. 6 years. A thin layer of forest soil. 60 years of chemical damage reversed. Go to an undisturbed forest. Find the ground beneath a mature tree. Scrape away leaf litter. Take several handfuls of the dark, crumbly soil just below. Mix it into your garden beds. Bacteria double every 20 minutes. A handful becomes a universe in weeks. No corporation can patent this. No store can sell you what is already in the nearest woodland. Depression families threw away nothing, and the thing they refused to throw away most, vegetable peelings, eggshells, coffee grounds, stale bread, became one of the most effective soil amendments you can produce at home. Without a compost bin, without turning, without waiting months. Long before the Japanese process called Bokashi was formally documented in the 1980s, families across Eastern Europe, rural Asia, and Depression-era America were fermenting kitchen waste directly in clay pots and burying it in their growing beds. Standard composting requires heat, oxygen, turning, and weeks of labor. Fermentation works without air, and it works fast. The microbes responsible for fermentation pre-digest the waste, breaking down complex carbohydrates and proteins into simple compounds that plant roots absorb immediately. A 2019 study published in the journal Bioresource Technology found that fermented kitchen scraps increased plant growth by 40% and soil microbial activity by 26% compared to even some forms of finished compost. The Depression-era version required only a clay pot, a lid, and whatever the kitchen produced. Layer the scraps, press out the air pockets, seal the pot, wait 3 weeks. Then bury the pre-digested material 6 inches into your garden bed. Within 2 weeks of burial, it has fully integrated into the soil. What your kitchen throws away every single day is exactly what your garden is hungry for. Nothing leaves the system. That is the logic of survival. When Depression families had nothing else, they had jars. Glass jars on shelves in every kitchen, every pantry, every basement. And the most important jars were not filled with canned tomatoes. They were filled with seeds. Seed saving is not just practical, it is scientifically superior. A 2018 study at the Earlham Institute examined 100 wheat varieties worldwide and found that plants develop epigenetic changes, actual alterations in gene expression, based on where they grow, and pass those changes to their offspring. A 2016 study on 180 rice varieties showed over 50% changes in gene regulation accumulated under local stress conditions over centuries of cultivation. What this means plainly? Seeds from your garden know your garden. They know your soil chemistry, your frost dates, your specific pest pressures. Seeds from a catalog were selected in someone else's reality. Depression families saved from the biggest, earliest, most disease-resistant plants every single year. They dried seeds in shade, never direct sun. Stored them in glass with a pinch of wood ash to absorb moisture. Labeled them carefully, traded them with neighbors. Today, 4 companies control 56% of the global seed market. In 2013, the Supreme Court ruled 9-0 that a farmer owed $84,000 for replanting seeds he bought from a grain elevator because they were patented. 90% of vegetable genetic diversity has been lost in the past century. but 660 seed libraries now operate across 48 states. The resistance is growing. Your grandmother's jar was not storage. It was her Declaration of Independence. Here is a rule that every Depression-era farmer understood, and that modern gardening has almost entirely abandoned. Your soil should never stop working. When the harvest ends and beds go bare, something invisible begins. Rain leaches nutrients downward and out of reach. Wind strips away topsoil. The microbial community, without living roots to feed it, begins to collapse. By spring, you are starting from a weaker position than you ended in fall. Depression families did not accept this. After the harvest, they scattered seeds, crimson clover, winter rye, hairy vetch, not crops to eat, crops to protect and build. Hairy vetch fixes 80 to 200 pounds of nitrogen per acre each season, for free. Nitrogen captured directly from the atmosphere by bacteria living in root nodules. At today's fertilizer prices, that is $120 to $180 per acre built overnight at the cost of a handful of seeds. A meta-analysis of cover crop studies found grass cover crops reduce weed pressure by 68% through shading and competition alone. No herbicide. In the devastating drought year of 2012, farmers using cover crops saw soybean yields 11.6% higher and corn yields 10% higher than bare soil neighbors. That is not a theory. That is food on the table during the worst growing year in a generation. In spring, cut the cover crop at the base. Leave it on the surface. It becomes your living mulch. Trick number 2 taking over from trick number 8. 2 systems, working in sequence, building the foundation of next season before this one is even finished. Growing food is only half the system. Depression families understood something the modern refrigerator has made us completely forget. The harvest is not the end. It is the beginning of the next phase. A root cellar is the original food preservation technology. No electricity, no packaging, no chemicals, just cool temperature, stable humidity, and darkness. Conditions that slow the biological processes that cause decay. Root vegetables stored at 32 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit and 90 to 95% humidity remain nutritious and edible for 4 to 6 months after harvest. A 2022 study in Post-Harvest Biology and Technology found that root cellar conditions extended carrot viability by 340% compared to uncontrolled storage, with minimal nutritional loss. Depression families extended this far beyond a dedicated cellar. They packed carrots and beets in boxes of damp sand. They braided onions and garlic and hung them in cool, dry spaces. They buried cabbages in straw in the ground, the earth itself maintaining a near-constant temperature below the frost line through the coldest winter months. They stored potatoes in darkness just above freezing, where starches remain stable for months with no sprouting. Your garden does not end at the first frost. It ends when the last stored vegetable from that season is eaten. With the right knowledge, that could be 6 months after you press the first seed into the soil. That is what it means to be truly fed by the ground, not just through the season, but through every season that follows it. In 1934, a woman named Margaret Hollis in rural Ohio grew enough food to feed her family of 7 through the worst years of the Depression. She used a trench bed. She saved every seed. She never bought fertilizer. She never went hungry. Her granddaughter still gardens the same plot today, using the same methods, and she says the soil is richer now than it was when her grandmother first broke it. That is what these 9 tricks actually are. Not hacks, not shortcuts. A relationship with soil built over generations, one that no corporation could sell, and so they tried to make you forget it. If this channel is the kind of place you want to come back to, honest, science-backed, no sponsor, no agenda, then subscribe. Hit the bell. We post every week, and the next video might be the one that changes your garden forever.